very, very excited about having you on. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very excited to be here.
Good, good. And where are you at the moment?
I'm currently in Bangalore in India.
Bangalore in India. Fabulous. And you've been there for how long?
This time I've been here since COVID began its horrible march across the world. But it's actually the third time I've been living in India. The other two times by choice, and this time what had been planned as a brief visit has turned out to be much longer than expected, and
Wow.
looks like it's still going to continue for some time.
Yeah, it seems to be here for the long run. We're going to speak a little bit about the wonders of COVID a little bit later on, but firstly, so Mark, I'm super excited about having you on, and I'm going to explain a little bit more as to why later. But I suppose we should explain for our listeners how we got in touch. It was through a mutual friend of ours who is actually going to appear on the podcast a little bit later in the series as well. So that'll be exciting. And you're an author, you're a writer. You have, I want to make sure I get this right, 10 published thrillers that are currently out.
Yes,
is that correct?
Yes, I have 10. Yes, 9 published, and another one that's due will be out at the beginning of February. And I'm currently beavering away on one that's going to be released at the end of February.
Amazing! Wow, you're a busy man.
I try to be, yes.
That's fantastic. Before we get into what your books and what they're about and how amazing they are, can you tell us a little bit about your journey, like before you actually got into writing? How long have you been writing for? Where were you born? Where did you live previously? Because I know that your background, I have had the pleasure of reading through it, but for our listeners, where were you born? Let's go with that to begin with.
Sure. Well, I was actually born in Cyprus. I consider myself a New Zealander, a Kiwi, but I didn't actually move there until I was 5 years old. My mum's a New Zealander, but my dad is English, and he was based in Cyprus with the British Army when I was born. And shortly after that, we moved to Germany when my second brother was born, then the UK, and then my father took a transfer to the New Zealand Army. And we all moved to New Zealand then when I was around 5 years old, and I grew up there. I have a New Zealand passport. I consider myself a diehard Kiwi. Although recently, when I added up the number of years I've lived away from New Zealand, I've actually lived out of New Zealand longer than I ever lived there. So it's my roots are there, but I'm also quite a gypsy. I love to travel. And I've since growing up in New Zealand, I've lived in England, I've lived in Australia, I've lived in Hong Kong twice, I've lived in India 3 times. I've spent extended periods in other countries in Asia as well. I get restless if I'm anywhere for too long, which is how COVID has been a little bit tough.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So you mentioned Hong Kong there, which, as our listeners know, or some of them know, that's where I was for the last 5 years. And so when you're not in India, you're based in Discovery Bay in Hong Kong. Is that right?
Oh, yes. I've been twice. I've been in Hong Kong. I lived in Hong Kong. First time from just before the handovers in '96 until 2002, and then more recently 3 years up until March last year. I haven't always been a writer, so in my Hong Kong life, I was actually in real estate. So my whole career up until I started writing was actually in property, mainly residential property, selling apartments and houses in the UK, New Zealand, and Hong Kong. So when I was in Hong Kong, I was selling investment apartments in Australia to expats expats and locals all throughout Asia, and also the Middle East.
Wow. Incredible.
So it's quite a change to what I do now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, can you tell us exactly when you started with writing, when that began, that journey?
Well, um, actually, starting writing would have happened probably well, I just had a look this morning. My first book was published in the middle of 2018, so I would have started writing that late 2017, early 2018. That's when I actually started writing. But if you go a bit deeper and think about how I got into writing and what actually led me to this career, you could probably go back to my childhood. I've not always wanted to be a writer, but I've always read a lot.
Okay.
When I was growing up, I was one of those nerdy kids who always had a book.
Yeah.
I'd wake up in the morning and wedge a book under the pillow and read it while I was getting dressed. I'd read a book while walking to school. I'd hide a book in my textbooks in class. I just read all the time, even late at night under the covers with a torch.
Fabulous.
So I've always had a love for the written word. And I remember reading a children's author at the time called Willard Price, who's written about 40 books. I think he's Canadian, but he wrote about a family who captured wild animals for zoos. And I used to be fascinated by these stories because they were set in Africa and Borneo and all these exotic places I'd never been. And I remember thinking at that time, wouldn't it be so cool to be able to travel to all these places and write about it?
Yeah.
And that was just a random thought at the time. So it's only now when I look back, I think maybe that was one of the seeds of what led to what I'm doing now. And then later on, when I was a teenager, I read a lot of books by an author called Dick Francis, who was a jockey. Actually, I think he rode for the Queen. But he was a steeplechase jockey, and when he retired, he started writing, and he wrote murder mysteries based in the horse racing world. And every book, although it was based in the horse racing world, had a character who had a different speciality. So it might have been a pilot who flew trainers and jockeys in between races, or it might have been a photographer. So each book, he researched that part of, or that skill, and then based it in the world he knew. And again, I still remember having that thought that wouldn't it be great to spend 6 months learning something and then write about it the following 6 months. Recently, I had that image of him shattered by learning that it was actually his wife who did all the research. She went out and learned how to be a photographer and then gave him all the notes, and he wrote a book about it. But still, that again was another seed or another spur that actually now I look back has led me to where I am today.
Yeah.
The actual act of writing the first book in the John Hayes series, Vengeance, I was at a time in my career where I was thinking, it was a bit of a midlife crisis. I was thinking, do I really want to spend the rest of my life doing what I'm doing? And I'd loved my career up until then, but it got to the stage where I was just fed up with sending emails and answering emails all day and calling up people who really didn't want me to speak to them, and then trying to sell them something they really didn't want and actually didn't need.
I've been there before myself. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought I need to do something different. And I had an idea. I've spent a lot of time in India, even when I was in Hong Kong, coming back and forth. My wife is Indian. And actually, my family has a tie to India. My father was actually born in Bangalore. So by a strange twist of fate, my life has come full circle, and I've ended up in Bangalore just by chance. His mother is actually Anglo-Indian from Kerala, and his parents met and fell in love in Bangalore when the British still ruled over India. So before partition, my grandfather was here as a British soldier and met my grandmother, who was a nurse, and they fell in love, got married. My father was born here. So that's another story.
Such a fabulous story. Fabulous story. Yeah.
So anyway,
it's a book waiting to happen in itself, I think.
It is. It's just getting the time to sit down and do it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But to go back to the first book, I had the idea that from one of my trips to India was that what if something happened to a member of my family, and there weren't the usual ways of getting justice. So in a lot of countries, or most of the countries, there's a legal system that works reasonably efficiently. There's the police force that we can rely on, that sort of thing. But in India, it can be a bit murkier, and often the justice lies in the hands of who has the most power, who has the most money and influence. And I'd read so many stories, in actual real stories in the newspapers and things like that, of people who had something happen to them, and even if the police had tried to sort things out and apprehend the person concerned, there was sometimes power or strings pulled from above, which meant that when their hands were tied, and justice was never served. So I'd seen all this happening, and I thought, what would I do in that situation? So that seed, that germ of an idea had always been in my head. And I remember sitting in the office in Hong Kong and bored out of my mind, thinking, really, I've got to think of something else to do. So I thought, why don't I just start? I love to read. I'm pretty. Like to think I'm pretty good at English, although everything I'd written up until then was work related. I thought, why don't I just sit down and start with this idea and write something out? And the great thing is when you're writing something on your computer, your boss just thinks you're working anyway. So I hope he never sees this podcast, but I would spend half the day just writing out my, the chapters as they came to mind, in between emails, in between answering phone calls. And I actually managed to write half the book in the office, and the rest of it at home. And then sent it to the editor and expecting her to throw it back and say, this is terrible and you need to don't give up your day job. But actually the response was good. So, and that's how it started. And I thought, yippee, I'm out of it. I'm off.
Yeah, that's it. And I can see why it was so well received. I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that I was super excited about meeting with you today and having this chat. I myself, I listen to audiobooks, and I read lots of theatre plays because with my background in performing and acting, for me, I've never really been one that's got into fiction books as such. And I know that lots of people are going to be like, what? How? This is not possible. But for me, I just struggle to be drawn into the stories, and I would lose concentration and focus very easily. And, a book could take me months on end, to get through. And I took a look at your first book, Vengeance, and set in predominantly in Bangalore. And I was expecting to read bits of it and just get a feel for your writing style, because obviously we were going to have a chat. And I was just completely blown away, and I was wrapped up in it, and I couldn't put it down. And I started reading them. It would have been 2 weeks ago now, and I am on your fourth book. So it's a sort of a monumental moment for me. It's a bit of a landmark. And my wife said to me the other evening, she was like, should we pop something on the TV? And I was like, no, I've got to read. It's getting to a super exciting point in this story, and I can't. And she kind of looked at me and she was like, you are not the man that I married, so you have you've changed me, Mark.
Fantastic.
And the books are incredible. The attention to detail you mentioned about, this character that explores different countries, and you can really see and feel that you have had this firsthand experience, the attention to detail with the characters, with the local language, the way people communicate with each other, the costume, the dress, it's just it's fascinating. And for me, the Hong Kong story was fabulous as well, because I obviously lived there. So all the reference points, I couldn't get enough of that. and you're just jumping from one country to the next. John Hayes. I mean, it's brilliant. I strongly recommend everyone to get out there and read your books. They're exciting. They pack a punch. The characters are lovable. Some of them not so lovable, but I can't get enough of John Hayes. I think he's an ordinary guy in extraordinary circumstances, and it's fascinating to see how he deals with these situations and how he manages to bring other characters on the journey with him as well. And that's what I really like, that you're bringing in other characters that are slightly apprehensive and uneasy about getting involved in various things. I'm not going to say too much. I don't want to give it away, but I strongly recommend it. They are absolutely amazing.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm very happy about that. I've always remembered books that I've never been able to put down, and Dick Francis was one of the authors I mentioned. I remember reading them even when I had school the next day. I'd be reading them till 2 or 3 in the morning, and that's the effect I wanted to get. I wanted people to get drawn into it and not want to put the story down.
Yeah. So that's exactly what they do.
I'm glad it's worked.
Yeah, it has. It really has. And I'll be sad when I get to the end of them all. You're going to have to keep making more, Mark.
Yeah, well, number 7 out in February. So.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. So can you tell me, are there any particular moments in your life that you have a great sense of pride for, monumental moments for you? For me, it's, reading your books and getting so wrapped up into them. Have you got moments in your life where you are just totally amazingly proud of what you've done and what you've achieved? Is there anything that kind of sticks to mind for yourself?
I think certainly relating to books, I never forget. Well, there are 2 things I never forget. One was actually seeing Vengeance, my first ever book, actually live on the Amazon store. And the second one was actually getting a printed copy, so a paperback in my hand, and being able to hold it there and see, wow, I've actually written this, and it's got my name on it, and I still get tremendous pleasure even today just looking at looking at a copy of that paperback, and people ask me to sign copies and things like that, and I think this is actually all come out of my head. It's all created from my head, and I'm able to entertain people with the weird workings of my brain. So that really sticks in my head. That's something I'm very, very proud of. And that feeling is there every time I finish a new book. The actual process of writing the book can be very painful. I've had a painful morning today where I've really struggled to get words on the page. And it's the same every book, but when I finally finish the final draft and ready to be sent off and uploaded, I still get that feeling of immense pride and think that's another story that's just been created. Those people in that story have been created out of thin air, and that's a person that hopefully people will be able to relate to, and it's just the workings of the mind really fascinate me, and so that pleasure does not diminish every time a new book is out. So nice. That's something that really sticks with me.
Well, that's lovely to hear. Let's jump on very quickly. You mentioned earlier about COVID, and that you're currently in India, and you're not sure exactly when this is going to all finish and how long you're going to be there for. What has 2020 been for yourself? I'm aware we're in a new year now, but looking back on 2020, what sort of springs to mind for you? I know a lot of people have struggled, but also I've had guests on the podcast, and I've spoken to other people who have used this time to actually develop new skills, use the quiet, use the fact that there isn't so much going on, there aren't so many distractions, to actually focus on themselves a little bit, and a little bit of self-healing. It might be training, it might be learning new skills, it might be getting more words down on paper for yourself. I don't know what it would be, but how has 2020 been for yourself, or how was 2020 for you, and and your experiences?
Those people you mentioned annoy me actually because they make me feel bad about myself. Um, I know a lot of people think, oh, it's really good to you've got all this. People have actually said it to me. You must be really being creative and getting a lot of words down, and you've got all this time now because you have no distractions. You're at home, but it wasn't actually so easy. And I don't really have a right to complain. There are people who have lost their livelihoods. There are people who have really struggled, and we saw that firsthand here in India when they had the first lockdown, and there were people on daily wages who actually were starving to death. So I don't really have a right to complain, but I also just want to mention it because a lot of people I know in the creative industry have been beating themselves up because they feel they should have done more with the time they had in 2020. But it wasn't that easy. I mean, if you were stuck at home with your family, that alone brings its own pressures. Just the fact of having everyone in the house at the same time and having no outlet, no, what would you call it, escape valve. So I certainly didn't write as much as I thought I would. But I also have come to terms with that, in that, okay, that was just something we had to go through, and I shouldn't. There are some people who are on a different path and maybe more able to achieve in situations like this. But the time also has given me a chance to reflect on what's important, and so many of the things that I felt were important, so many of the possessions I thought are needed, just have not needed in the last 12 months. How many pairs of shoes have I worn? I've been barefoot for almost 12 months now.
Okay.
I probably worn the same.
I hope you're washing your feet, Mark.
Yeah.
You don't
Probably
need
an
to
inch
answer
taller,
that.
an inch taller with all the calluses now. But I've probably worn the same, 4 or 5 sets of clothes, and everything else there's so much in my cupboard that I've not needed. And I found more pleasure in simple things, like just going out into the countryside at the weekend and finding a quiet spot away from people and enjoying the sun and enjoying the fresh air. Instead of...
You're a keen photographer as well, right? Have I got that right?
Yes.
Yeah. I follow you on social media, and I see lots of wonderful pictures that you take, and storytelling, not just through the written word, but also through pictures as well. It's really nice. Have you been doing some of that during this time and during 2020, or?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot more recently, that we've been getting out a bit more. But I also started, this is a fun project, an Instagram channel called Birds from My Balcony. So I've taken just photographs of some of the birds that have visited the garden around our apartment, and even onto the plants on our balcony. And I'd taken the photos anyway, just for fun. And then I thought, I've actually got a little story here that this was created during lockdown, and every photo was taken either from inside the apartment or on the balcony itself. And I've managed to get beautiful photos of sunbirds and
Oh, wow. Yeah. I've seen a few of these.
Yeah, so that's another little creative outlet I've had.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Amazing.
It's been fun.
Very nice, very nice. All right, so I mean, let's give our listeners an opportunity to connect with you if they would like to. I'm sure this chat is going to inspire lots and lots of people to get out there and, if they're feeling creative, put something down on paper and try and write something if that's what they want to do, or pick up a camera and create some stories through photography or whatever it may be. But what's the best way for our audience, our listeners, to reach out to you if they want to, if they like the sound of you, and they think, oh wow, Mark is a cool guy, I would love to say hi, or just to take a look at your work and what you've been up to? What are the best ways? And I will mention that I will obviously put these links down in the description for the podcast. But yeah, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Well, I'm on it's my website, markdavidabbott.com, but I'm also on Facebook at Mark David Abbott Author. and Instagram, the Kiwi Gypsy.
Kiwi
So
Gypsy, I love it.
yeah. So any of those, I reply to all messages. I can also email me at mark@markdavidabbott.com. I answer all of the emails as well. I'm always happy for readers to reach out to me, and writing is a solitary pursuit, so it's always nice when people do get in touch, to let me know I'm not alone and that people are actually consuming the material I put out there.
Yeah. Amazing. There we go, guys. Lots of ways to get in touch with Mark, and he's happy to say hi back. That's always nice to hear. Before we jump onto a little game that I've put together for us, which I'm playing with all our guests, I just wanted to mention that I'm also going to play an extract from your first book, from Vengeance. Could you set up that scene for us? Mark's given me the honor of actually performing this scene, which I'm super excited about. Can you tell everyone? Can you give a sort of a run into that scene, and then so they know what they're going to see, what it's about? Yeah.
Okay. Well, the story is set in India, and it features the character John Hayes, who is a British expat. Working in the Indian office of a company in Bangalore, and it's his first overseas posting, and he loves it. He's here with his wife, who he loves very much, and they really enjoyed exploring the countryside and going out on trips on the weekend and going to the jungles and things like that. But one day, she is out for dinner. He's at home, and she's out for dinner with some friends, and she at the end of dinner, she calls him up and says, "I'm on my way home." And he's sitting there watching TV, having a nice cold beer, and waiting, and then he gets a panic call from her, and realizes something's gone wrong. And I don't really want to say much more.
No, don't say it anymore. That's all we need. That's all we need. It's a powerful scene. And yes, I'm very much looking forward to performing that. And we will play that at the end of this episode. When I read your books, it immediately sprung to mind that they could easily be transferred into a film genre. They're action packed, they're short scenes, they are full of punch. They draw you straight into what's happening. Is this something that you've thought about doing at some point?
Yeah, I think every author would love their books to be picked up for the big screen. But I also think that the John Hayes series would actually lend itself to a film adaptation. I mean, even when I write, when I'm picturing the scene, it's like a movie in my head. And I can actually see it happening in my mind's eye, and even the atmosphere, the smells, that sort of thing. So I already have an idea of how it should look if it was put on the screen. If it did happen, I would really want to have some input as to how it's done, because I have that vision.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll wait and see. I mean, there's thousands of authors out there who would love their books to be adapted. So of course, we'll see if I get picked up amongst them.
Wow, so exciting, Mark. But without further ado, let's jump on to our little game, little would you rather, to almost finish us off for today.
This is the hardest part.
This is the hardest part. No, surely not. So we're going to ask 5 questions. I say we, I am. There's nobody else here. It's just me. I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and just first thing that comes into your head, don't give it too much thought. Let me know when you are ready to go. I've suddenly turned into a game host. My voice changed and everything then.
I just have to limber up.
Are you ready?
Stretches. I'm ready.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so number 1, would you rather always be 10 minutes late or always be 20 minutes early?
Early. 20 minutes early.
All right, 20 minutes early. I like it. Number 2.
Being late, I hate people who are late.
I know, me too. It's infuriating.
Yes.
Number two. Would you rather have one real get out of jail free card or a key that opens any door?
I play it safe and take the get out of jail free card.
Right. Number 3, would you rather know the history of every object you touched or be able to talk to animals? It's a bit of a tricky one, that. The history of every object that you touched or be able to talk to animals.
I'm not sure I want to know the history of everything I touch. Yeah,
So
I think I'd rather talk to animals. Yeah.
Okay, I've got a Dr. Dolittle on our hands. Number 4, would you rather be married to a 10 with a bad personality or a 6 with an amazing personality?
Well, personality wins every time.
All right, love it. You're going to be very popular, Mark. Number 5, would you rather be, and this is the last one now, would you rather be able to talk to land animals, animals that fly, or animals that live under the water?
Animals that fly.
Okay.
And I'll tell you
Can you
why.
give us a reasoning for that? Yeah, go on.
I've been trying hard to take photographs of the raptors, the kites and eagles that I always see in the air above where I live, and I'm just fascinated at what it must be like to be able to be up so high, and they just soaring around riding the air currents. And I noticed last week I was on the west coast of India, on the beach, and every evening at a certain time the sky would be filled with hundreds of kites. So there's a particular type they called the Brahmini kite, which is large with brown with the white head. And they'd just be up there, just soaring away and circling around. And I remember saying to my wife, I said, I think they just got up there for fun, because they're always up there the same time in the evening, and there's hundreds of them, and they just fly around in circles. And so how much fun that must be. And I'd love to be able to speak to them and
find out what they're up to.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm totally on board with that for sure. Right, let's wrap it up. We're going to wrap it up with Mark's final thoughts for today. Can you give us, Mark, for our listeners out there, a life message? It can be anything. What's about work, about how to look at life, how to deal with challenging moments, how to embrace the good times, etc., and the bad times. Have you got any final thoughts for our audience today? It's a big one, I know. It's a big one.
Well, so many life messages. I would say, and it's probably brought on more by what's going on in the world at the moment, but I'd say life is short. Don't waste time. Do what you want to do, and do what makes you happy.
Do what you want to do and what makes you happy. I love that. Thank you so much, Mark, for coming on today. Really appreciate your time. And
it's been fun.
Thank you. And I hope that all our listeners jump on and take a listen to this, and also go out there and read Mark's books, because they are fabulous. As I said before, I put all of the links down, so it'll be nice and easy to get in touch with him if you want to do so. Thank you very much for today, Mark, and take care and have a good day out there in India.
Thank you very much.
All right, mate. Thank you.
Bye.
Charlotte! Charlotte! John screamed down the phone. He could hear voices in the background but couldn't make out what they were saying. Charlotte! His hands were shaking, his heart pounding in his chest. He shouted down the phone, but there was still no response. He ended the call and dialed her number again. It rang and rang. He tried again and again, but there was no answer. He dialed 100, it too rang and rang, but no one answered. Fucking useless bastards! He screamed. He ran to the kitchen and ran his finger down the list of local numbers stuck to the fridge. He found the number for the local police station and dialed. Hello, said a gruff voice. Something has happened to my wife. I think she's been attacked. Where, sir? Next to Palace grounds. There was a car accident and they were attacking my wife. Sir, that is not our area. You have to call Shivnagar police station. The number is... Fuck you! Fuck you! John cursed, ending the call. He grabbed the keys from the kitchen countertop and ran to the front door. He pulled on his running shoes and unlocked the SUV as he ran toward it. Slamming the vehicle into reverse, he pulled out onto the road, and tires screeching, headed for the main gate. He sounded the horn repeatedly, flashing his lights, and the security guard ran from the guard booth and pulled open the gate as John sped through, barely avoiding running him over. He turned right and sped down the narrow access road, and then turned left onto the highway and accelerated as fast as he could. Putting his lights on high beam, he raced south toward the city, thankful there was little traffic at that time of night. Swerving around slower-moving lorries and a few late-night taxis, he raced down toward Hebel Flyover, crossing it at high speed, honking at anyone who came in his way. He flashed his lights continuously, passing cars on the inside when they refused to move across. He sped past Sanjaynagar and down into the underpass at Mekri Circle, the SUV bottoming out with a sickening thud as it hit the lowest point of the underpass and then climbed up the other side. He would worry about any damage later. He climbed through the gears as he raced up the slope toward Palace grounds, scanning the road ahead for signs of Charlotte in the car. As the road sloped down the other side, he saw the Toyota on the opposite side of the road, its lights still on. The passenger door open, he slammed his foot on the brake and screeched to a halt. Jumping out of the vehicle, he ran across and vaulted over the central road divider. A body lay curled in the gutter in front of the car, and his heart leaped into his mouth. "Charlotte!" he screamed and ran toward the body. He crouched down. It wasn't her. It was Sanjay, covered in blood. "Sanjay! Sanjay, where is Charlotte?" Sanjay groaned and opened his eyes. At first, they struggled to focus, but then lit up in recognition. Oh, sir. I'm so sorry, sir. Sorry, sir. Where is Charlotte? Where is she? They took her. They took her. And Sanjay lapsed back into unconsciousness.